Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it is time for the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. All right, first question. Should teenagers max out with 1 rep maxes? This does not have a straightforward answer. For teenagers, I would say realistically it's the same answer that we would give for adults. Okay? You have to assess the maturity of that teen. You have to assess what their form looks like. Are they competent enough in their lift to safely max out? Do they have basic form down? Have they built any sort of strength base? Have they made sure their core and everything is strong? Right? These are the things that we should be asking now. Some people say, but aren't they still growing? Well, that doesn't matter. There are teenagers who break world records in powerlifting. Okay? And I mean teenagers who are not adult teenagers, not 18. There are classes for this. I would say developmentally, probably minimum age would be about 13. The absolute bare minimum. Okay, but that's a teenager. If you're under 13, you're not a teenager. Hence, teen. The word teen. 13. 12 does not have the word teen in it. So, usually at that point, you've reached puberty. Okay, if you've reached puberty, you have the anabolic hormones in your body to get benefits from heavy resistance training. Okay? I think prior to that, they should be working on technique. In fact, I would say that prior to that, if you have an adolescent or a child lifting, they do not need to be even doing sets to failure. I wouldn't even worry about anabolic signaling. I wouldn't worry about a training response. Just have them stay active and learn good form. They shouldn't be lifting heavy. They shouldn't even be going close to muscle failure. Okay, because they're not going to benefit anyways to the same degree, right? But once they're a teenager, if anyone who can safely do a set to failure, if you can do a set of squats or a bench press or a deadlift to failure without injuring yourself, you can max out without injuring yourself because they're equally dangerous, right? They're equally dangerous. There's no difference between failing on rep 10 on a squat in a rack that can catch it versus failing on a 1 rep max. Pretty close to the same level of risk. So you've got to ask the question of, have they built a base? Do they know basic form? Can they perform the exercise correctly? The problem we run into is that a teenager may not be able to assess for themselves if they can perform an exercise correctly. Okay. But if they can perform an exercise correctly and proficiently and have built any sort of base, I don't have a problem with that. The problem with teenagers being put on conjugate. They probably need more adult supervision. And that's probably the largest difference because a teenager's judgment and experience level is going to be lower. They may not be able to safely assess for themselves if they're executing an exercise. And that's when we run into problems. But physically speaking, there's no problem at all. Right? There's no problem at all. All right, next question. I have gotten to a 145 good mornings and 145 Pendlay rows with strict form. I'm going to assume you mean for sets of 10. I still deadlift under 400. Any tips or guesses as to why? Thanks. P.S. For those curious or who don't believe me, I have vids posted on YouTube. Okay. Well, how much do I row in good morning for work sets? What have you seen me do recently? Right? What have you seen me do recently? 250 for multiple sets of 10 on a Pendlay row. 250. You've seen me do sets of 10 with 385 pounds on good mornings. I pulled 625. Probably can pull more than that at this point, and by the time this Q&A comes out, because it'll be like 3 weeks from now, I may have deadlifted more on camera, who knows. But if you do the math, ballpark, I can do around 40% of my deadlift for sets of 10 easily on rows. I can do 60% of my deadlift for sets of 10 on the good morning. Your math, if you were to carry that over to either one of those, is still less than 400 pounds. Okay. So what are my tips? You need to get bigger and stronger. You need to get stronger at rows and good mornings. It means you need to get bigger. Because one thing to say, oh yeah, I'm going to gain a bunch of weight on my 10 rep sets without getting muscle. People can argue all they want about neuromuscular efficiency on maxes and how size may not matter. Okay, whatever. All that nonsense. You're not going to make that same argument on your rows. If I tell you, oh, you need to put 100 pounds on your good mornings for sets of 10, over what you do right now, that's going to require significant hypertrophy. Right? You're going to have to get bigger and stronger. That's it. It is that simple. Because there's almost no technique to a conventional deadlift. I've told people before, I could take any one of you, walk you into a gym who doesn't have a perfect deadlift, and if I could coach you in person and position your body, I can teach you to have a perfect deadlift within 5 minutes. It's not a technical exercise. You're just not strong enough to pull 400 yet. It really is that simple. You don't have the support musculature to do it. Okay? You need to get stronger at those lifts. You need to get stronger at them. You know where they are now. You see where your ratios are, and you need to scale them up accordingly. Okay? And it is that simple. All right, next question. Can speed deads replace the clean? And my reply to him, which you guys already see, for general strength purposes. On a general strength and conditioning program, for the purpose that most people do cleans, yes. The answer is yes. Now, if you have any sort of sport-specific need for the power clean or the full clean, then you're going to need to train it. You can't replace it. Right? It comes down to why are you doing it. If you're doing cleans to get more explosive, to develop more speed by doing an explosive exercise, I would argue that speed pulls with bands is not only a replacement, I would argue that it is superior. Okay? People can disagree with that. That's fine. You can disagree. It is what I believe based upon the things I've observed and my understanding of the human body and training response, that it is superior for this purpose. If you're going to compete in strongman, so let's take that over to a different one. If you're going to compete in weightlifting, you have to perfect the clean. You don't just have to do the clean, you have to perfect the clean. And it better be amazing. Okay? That one's obvious. Strongman, since there's a lot of cleaning involved, it's not necessarily beautiful cleaning, it would behoove you and be wise to learn how to clean and to practice cleaning, especially with the various implements you might have to do it with, up to and including possibly an axle bar. Okay. Sports specific needs. And that's what we have to remember. We have our general training, but then we have sports specificity. And sports specific needs become obviously very important for the particulars of your sport. But for the goal of developing explosiveness within your potential, I think speed pulls are superior, particularly with bands. So the answer is obviously yes there. So it really comes down to specifically why you're doing cleans. And I'm going to assume, based on, as he said, speed deads, I'm going to assume it's for purposes of developing explosiveness. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys in part 2.